So the deep dish, I would like to take credit for it, but since what happened was David slammed my original idea for what we should talk about.
I didn't slam it.
And probably everyone
It's
silently
WWE.
agreed because no one came to my defense and said, no, Alan's article is better.
I was getting ready. So.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
So-
sure.
So anyways, yeah, the last 24 hours or maybe last 12 hours, David's been disagreeing with about every idea that I've had.
My favorite was the text message you sent in the group that said, "You hate me."
He does. He hates me. But we can at least pretend to like one another for at least 45 minutes. So, no,
I mean,
Dave-
we've been going for 30, so
Say, we
got 15
we have
minutes.
15
Closing
minutes
in.
left.
So here's the article.
And then the purge.
If you guys, if you're not, if you don't really watch a lot of TV news on
The TV.
TV about actors and actresses and stuff like this, you may not be aware of this. You guys don't even watch TV anymore.
Where's he going with this? I do.
You watch on YouTube.
Nope. We have cable.
Do you? Mm-hmm. So Candace Cameron Bure,
Bure.
Bure,
Beret.
and what is she known for? She's known as being on
DJ.
Full House, right?
DJ
DJ on
Tanner.
Full House.
DJ Tanner.
And so
I know her for several Hallmark films as well.
I know her as
Yes.
Kurt Cameron's,
Kurt Cameron's little sister.
Yeah.
No,
Yep.
she's much more than that.
Yep. So, but she became famous in Full House as a young lady, and now she's a grown up. And over the last 6 months, maybe she's been in the news quite a bit,
I feel like that's
Yeah.
accurate.
something like
There's
that.
been a
6
couple
months
of
to a
things,
year.
yeah.
So yeah, she's been on Hallmark forever. She's done like 50-something movies for them, I believe.
They're all wonderful.
Yeah, says
I've
all the
probably watched
ladies.
all of them.
Yeah. So yeah, for us guys, we can be thankful that there's one less actress that does
No,
a
there's a
Hallmark
couple.
movie. Yeah.
They poached a couple.
That's
so.
true. Yep. So the criticism is one, she's moved over from Hallmark to the new faith base. Was it
Great American Family.
There you go.
Yeah.
Great American Family, which is more of a faith-based type channel. And we'll get into the background of that a little bit, but she's been unpopular for other view. She was on The View, and shared her view on defending the Oregon Bakery, their decision to not do a wedding cake for a same-sex couple. And but the article that we are putting out there is the one from CNN, where she is wanting to put Christ back in Christmas and promoting this new Christmas movies and Christmas specials that are on this new channel. So anyways, I want to start off just asking you guys, one, what do you think about all the backlash that she's had? Is it justified? Do you think it's just more Christian bashing? One thing I saw that she was called a bigot for some of her views on marriage. So what are your general thoughts before we dive into?
Well, I think it's ironic, right? Because she's just doing something that she's passionate about. But if you don't agree with what she's doing, then she's considered a bigot, and she receives a lot of backlash. But however, if she was doing what everyone else in Hollywood was doing and was accepting all these immoral changes, from our point of view, immoral changes, then we would be calling her, right, a bigot. And so the irony is there. But also, like, she wouldn't receive the backlash if she just went along with how a lot of Hollywood goes. And so I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's justified. But I think, of all people, she comes from a family of believers, right? So she's used to it at this point, and it's unfortunate, but I think she's strong enough to be able to handle it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it's an interesting topic of the fact that we're looking to Candace Cameron Bure to put Christ back into Christmas movies.
DJ Tanner saves us all.
And so that's quite a daunting task to do, especially in the culture today. That's one, no longer showing like Rudolph on TV and even Charlie Brown, because the horrible corporation named Apple bought out the rights to Charlie Brown,
And so they won't show it anymore.
and they can't show it anymore on
Yeah.
TV.
Yeah, I just watched
But I mean,
the
I
one
would,
little episode where it was about Christ in Christmas.
it doesn't. It won't surprise me if they won't, like, if Apple didn't buy the rights to that, they would stop showing that on TV as well. But I I don't know. It's just interesting as a culture, we're looking to these holiday movies to get our fill of Christianity.
Yeah.
And this has become an issue or a thing that's come up in pop culture, that it's important, quote unquote, that Candace Cameron is bringing Christmas or Christ back to Christmas.
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of see it two ways like you do, David. I'm agreeing with you right now. I'm an olive branch.
This is a really good moment.
I feel the same way as I do with a lot of Christian music. You really don't know much about the artist who's written the song and singing it and everything else. And I think we do know a little bit more about Candace. In one way, I admire her because she's a Christian and she's living out her faith in the public eye, which is
She's
very
very
difficult.
open about it too.
Yeah, she's open about it. I don't think she's mean about it or disrespectful about it. I think she's just unapologetically trying to live out her faith and produce material that that might be something that people with traditional Christian values would enjoy. So I don't even know if she's trying to save Christmas, but she's trying to put Christ back into Christmas. And so, I think overall,
she's just trying to be herself, right? And so, like her brother is a very outspoken Christian. Her brother has been on the circuit doing talks about marriage and the truth about marriage and the truth about relationships and sticking to a traditional conservative view of what marriage is. And so he's been heavily criticized. I worked at a church that hosted him a couple of times for those conferences, and we were being picketed nonstop by people who believed in alternative lifestyles because they did not agree with his very conservative point of view. And the thing is, Candace did the same things. It just maybe isn't as well known as Kirk because, Kirk was very public about it. But Candace went around doing conservative Christian women's events for like Lifeway and, so she's on that same circuit as like Priscilla Shirer and all that kind of stuff. And then she got back involved in Hallmark TV movies, right? And so it's kind of like, all right, cool. So she's here, great. And then she started just being criticized in the news for being a believer. Yeah. But she's just being herself. And because she's being herself and because she's sticking to her values, she's under attack. And so I think for her to make a shift from something like being on Hallmark, which isn't necessarily we'd like to think, Hallmark movies are all great, but the Hallmark channel, the Hallmark Network isn't necessarily conservative in its views. For her to do something like this, good for her. Good for her. Should we be depending on her to put Christ back in Christmas? No. But I think this is an article that exists because she's been so public.
Right.
She has been in the public eye so much, especially for her faith. So they're trying to tie her faith back to putting Christ back in Christmas. But hey, if we want to hitch our wagon to that and do the same thing and make sure we're putting Christ back in Christmas, let's do it.
Yeah. And if you want to ruin your career in anything, just come out as a Christian with traditional values. So what's the solution for us as Christians? We live in a world where it's becoming harder to hold traditional Christian worldviews, topic of marriage right here. So what do we do as Christians? Do you think it's going to get easier? Or do you think it's going to get harder?
Definitely harder.
Mm-hmm.
But
before it gets better, it's probably going to get worse.
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe it's just we need to stop trying to be like a stronghold in pop culture, especially in like movies and such, because we can all agree that we can probably count on one hand that a good Christian, quote unquote, Christian movie has come out that that is actually good. We're not helping ourselves in that realm.
When we say
they're
good,
getting
we mean
better.
not cheesy.
Yeah, they're getting better. I mean, even though there's some controversy around The Chosen, I think it's excellent.
Yeah.
I think it's done so well. I don't mind them for striving to be better.
Right.
And I think just how we go about it.
Yeah.
Because even in this article that we were reading, there's a paragraph about Candace being a personal brand. Like she's branded herself as the Christian brand and using that for her benefit. And there's no wrong in being a Christian and being a business person, but also I feel like there's some pandering and exploitation of the Christian population to the point where we can use that as a way to benefit ourselves. The whole paragraph was about her selling her fashion, her saying like she's promoting her clothes, but then using a Bible verse to do that. Honestly, I don't know how a good way to do that without making it feel like pandering.
Yeah, that's a tough line right
Yeah,
there.
it's a real tough line.
I don't know enough about her to be able to comment on that one, but that would be tough. I mean, it's probably a lot of the stuff that she's doing is very good, but I'm sure that there's a line that can be crossed.
Well, and it's just odd. I mean, so much of our culture, we just brand everything, right? So
Yeah.
Forever 21, when it started, is a Christian company. You know,
What?
yeah,
Really?
I didn't know that.
They've got scripture on the bottom of their bags. So you look at their clothes though, and you would not guess because modest is not always hottest for them. And so they were able to somehow identify as Christian, but it not become their brand, and they were still profitable. And so it kind of is cruddy that Candace almost has to identify and becomes branded as a Christian in Hollywood, because why can't you just be, yes, your faith is part of your identity, as it should be, but why can't you just be yourself? But it happens to so many celebrities, I think. Like I even think of Taylor Swift, and just everything she supports is part of her brand. It's part of the Taylor brand. You know, when you go to a Dixie Chicks concert, what's going to happen? They made it really clear who they are, what they believe
Aren't
is
they
part
just
of
the Chicks now?
I'm calling them the Dixie Chicks still. So when you go to their concert, you know what's going to happen. They have branded themselves as people who believe these things, and they're very passionate about it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just kind of a shame that this pandering becomes a part of just who you are.
And part of that is the industry. Like if we were all, actors and actresses, think about what movies you would choose and what roles you would and what you would not, and what environment you'd want to be in, and how uncomfortable it would be, how hard it would be to be in that industry and to live out your Christian values. I think we would all be pigeonholed into going that route, or just not being an actor or actress.
Right.
It's like you've got to pick a lane because you're forced to. You're forced to pick a lane.
Right.
And I would say 95% go in this lane. And everyone else is like, if you have these values, you're in this lane,
Go in the lane less traveled.
And we kind of talked about it a little bit beforehand, is just this idea of now in our culture, there's a stigma when we change our minds on things.
Yeah.
Because, Candace spent all this time making movies at Hallmark. Not necessarily that they're bad or promoting something bad, but then she changed her mind and said, okay, I'm going to do something different. But then even her going to this new network has brought, backlash towards her, just because, yes, she's doing the same thing, but she's changing her mind on like, okay, how am I supposed to do this? And I feel like in our culture, we can't have an opinion and then hearing someone else say their opinion and changing our minds about it. And then now you're just have no backbone.
And Hallmark is moving in a different direction.
Correct.
Just like Disney is I guess over the years, decades, slowly moved in a direction, now quickly moving. I think Hallmark is doing the same thing. So she's making a decision like, time for me to jump ship. I don't think I can go in this direction.
Well, that brings up another question of like, okay, you said how as Christians are we to approach this issue? It almost feels like now it's the only way for someone in pop culture is to silo themselves from the culture itself.
Right.
So now they're creating this whole network that is Christian values, but then now they're just siloing themselves away from everything else.
Yeah.
So
It's
what would you say towards that?
Yeah, you can't mix the two
Right.
anymore. Like you've got stations they're only going to play shows that line up with their beliefs. Where like Charlie Brown and Rudolph, why can't those just be played on your local television shows anymore?
Right.
Right.
Well, and like I was thinking about this. The whole idea of Candace Cameron Bure being this like flag that we're going to cheer on, right? You think about whenever Ye decided, okay, I'm going to be a Christian. You think about whenever there were rumors that Justin Bieber was a Christian.
It is. I got corrected. It is Ye.
It is Ye. I figured it was because it was Kanye.
Yeah, it is Ye.
It wouldn't make any sense for him to completely change his name.
Right.
Anyway, so like you think about the fact that anytime somebody who is a super famous celebrity Okay. And many of us may not think of Candace Cameron Bure as being like, oh, superstar level.
Right.
But she was DJ for like, however
For
many
us
years.
90s kids. Yes.
And so, but we get excited about the idea or the potential of someone who's a believer being in a position of influence in Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
And so, like Chris Pratt has been in the headlines because of his beliefs. Your boy Tim Allen has been in the headlines because of his beliefs. And there's I think it's Patricia Heaton has been in the headlines because of her beliefs. These are celebrities that have either professed Christ or whatever, and then we do one of two things: we either rally behind them and put them on a pedestal, or we criticize them and say, "There's no way. Look at what they've done with their life. There's no way they're a believer." And like you said, okay, so we also were sinners at one point, and then God saved us, so there could be a transformation in our lives. But so whenever you get stuck in a culture like what Hollywood is, and and this could be for whatever culture you're in, it's exaggerated and exacerbated because of Hollywood, but you have to make the choice. Do you continue associating with and doing the same things you did, or do you make a change because you're a believer? And what do? We rally behind them if we think, we want them to be our voice, or there's no way that person could be saved, right? And so just think of the chaos that someone who's in that limelight, in that celebrity is dealing with, and what it looks like for them to experience that. So like in this case, I mean, I don't think I fault her for making the shift. I mean, she even said in the article, she was quoted as saying, this network is very different than it was when I first started, and there's been a change of leadership and they're going different directions. I mean, for us here, if we had a pastor change and all of a sudden we started supporting things that we as a church that we are like, this, I don't agree with that. That's not in my Bible. We'd probably all jump ship and go somewhere else, so I can't criticize her for doing the same thing, and then there would be people that said, well, you worked at that church and look what they support. Yeah, but they didn't support that when I worked there, and so I think we just have to be careful.
That's hard.
Analyzing a little bit too much when we think about that.
That also begs the question, is fame and popularity sinful?
Jesus was famous.
But now he wasn't seeking fame.
No, he wasn't seeking it.
I'm saying seeking fame. Is that...
I don't
because
want to be famous.
Literally the only way to succeed in that industry is to gather fame.
Yeah, unless you're a talented actor or actress.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think sometimes...
You have a few.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off.
No.
I think sometimes a lot of people, what's sad to me when it comes to celebrities, that they fall into fame. They didn't expect to become so popular. And then by the time it happens, they're so lost. And you see, Aaron Carter recently. Yeah. There's someone who probably in the moment was caught up. This sounds really exciting. And then couldn't handle it. He didn't know what he was seeking at that point and just lost his purpose. And so when I observe Candace Cameron, it's easier to see that I think she is intentional in what she's doing. And therefore, I would, from my outsider's perspective, would say she's not seeking fame, which I do think is sinful.
Right.
But she's seeking to use her identity and her faith for a good intention.
Gain influence.
And I think that at the end of the day, like the goal for her seems to be like kingdom growth, like creating this network where families can watch TV shows as families once again, and it's wholesome and it's good year round, and it puts Christ back in Christmas during the holidays. Then I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And going back to the question of what do we do, like what's our role in this? I think support is massive. And we're starting to see that play out in television too. People choosing to watch something else over, Monday Night Football or whatever. And
no, well,
it's the
that's
award
a bad
shows.
example. But
no, it's the award shows. Like the award shows have been tanking, and like
there's
CNN's
all kinds of
networks,
stuff.
Even like
tanking
and
regular TV shows that people are like, this is a good show, and you're pushing, agendas here or whatever. Right. So they're starting to see a lot more of that. I want wholesome television kind of coming back. But recently I stopped shopping at a store, and I never do this. And it's very out of character for me, because honestly, if I made a list of all the places I couldn't shop at, I wouldn't shop, which my husband would appreciate. But I just stopped shopping there because I wasn't pleased with how they actually had a man come on who's transgender and speak about womanhood. And I'm not okay with that. Yeah. You're not a woman. at the end of the day. And you don't get to tell me how to live my life as a woman because you are not one. And that is coming from
a man won Woman of the Year.
I know.
Just took him a couple of months.
I know.
It's Ron Swanson.
And so it's hard for me to go back into that store to buy the products that this man was pushing.
Yeah.
And it's so anyways, I pay more for shipping. I have no problem doing that because I cannot give them my money at this point. Yeah. And so I don't know. I think we're just seeing that more, and it's getting tougher for believers to decide where to draw the line.
Yeah. I wrote down several notes and I put like reality. I think that as Christians, like the church, I grew up in the age of like seeker-sensitive, seeker-passionate church where we did everything with the eyes of how can we reach people outside the walls of the church, and even kind of been guilty of placating and trying to be a cool church or whatever else because I just grew up in lame, fall asleep kind of church, very old school, traditional. And so that was just kind of a wave and maybe the pendulum swinging in one direction. But I think we're going to enter into a season where the paradigm shift is going to be away from that. And it's going to be like a purified church. You're not going to go to church unless you really, really want to. There's not going to be a lot of benefit for, quote, a nominal Christian to go to church. There's going to be too many negatives, and I think it's going to pare down the church, and that's going to be sad and hard for us to digest as Christians, but I don't think the mega church is going to be something that's going to be very common in the future. Or it may be that we have more mega churches and not very many churches of 50 to 100
the community church because people want to band together. So
and so it's going to be. I think we're entering a different time as church, and we're going to have to. I have to think differently. My generation's going to have to think differently in that way, and I think that we're going to have to count the cost. We're forced to count the cost of being a Christian.
And I think there's one thing that I think the culture actually has right. Is this notion of authenticity is important. It's starting to grow as an importance in the culture.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, the authenticity is according to what you believe.
Right. I was going to say, because it's not authentic to have a man.
No.
Advertising
but I'm saying,
as a woman.
like, people can tell if you're authentic or not.
Yeah.
And I think that is starting to become more and more important. And like you said, for the church themselves, the importance here, and I guess for if she ends up listening to this, hi, is to be authentic in what you're doing, not necessarily trying to push an agenda, but just be authentic. And like you said, let you be yourself in the fact that you're believing in what you're believing for Christianity purposes, not necessarily just believing in your truth. Yeah. But if you're really wanting to push a Christian lifestyle and a mindset, is to be authentic, and like we've said multiple times, is that meet people where they're at and build relationships, not necessarily trying to push something on somebody. Which I can very well see this going as like this network is really just pushing this Christian ideal on just people, and nowadays that doesn't work. It's more relationship building. I don't know how you can build a relationship with a TV network, but what we need to do as Christian is to be authentic in our faith.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing that's coming out of all this.
Yes. It's just kind of burning off the chaff of like superficial things.
Any other thoughts on that? I've got a lot. I think it's going to be boring for most people though.
What? Just say your thoughts.
I think that as Christians, we're going to have to learn from our brothers and sisters in other countries.
Yeah.
Like in East Asia, Middle East. I think we have a lot that we've never experienced before. And it may not ever get as bad as some of those countries where they're actually being put to death. But I mean, and that is happening rampantly around the world. But I think we're going to have to learn from our brothers and sisters in Christ in different parts of the world where they have been living in a similar type setting or worse, for decades, for long periods of time. And so I think that's one thing as Christians we ought to do. We ought to probably start reading some books from Christians from other countries, and they're out there. We need to learn how to articulate our faith in an effective way. It's in my mind, it's not just a matter of telling truth. We want to be truthful. It needs to be truth, but we really need to think about how do we communicate this to a world that's becoming more and more lost, where our views are becoming more and more extreme, and being able to articulate why we believe what we believe. And that's not always easy. You know, being a lazy Christian is not going to work, you know. And then, you know, I didn't flesh this one out, but you might have to create your own culture, start your own business. If you can't make it in the business that you're in, or if you're finding it hard, maybe you're gonna have to start your own culture, you know, do something different. We're gonna have to get creative if we're gonna be asked 2 or 3 questions. Do you believe this? Do you believe this? Do you believe we can't work here? You know, interview questions. If it gets so hard, are you a Christian? Oh, you go to church? Well, what do you think about this? It could be harder. So we're going to have to become more creative. That sounds really, you know, really sad and dark, but I'm just
at that point, we've talked about the downfalls of siloing. Would that be a silo in itself?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah. And I've been the one, but you may not have a choice.
Yeah.
Because we've talked about that. Maybe not on Real Talk, but we talked about that from the aspect of as believers who work in the church, right? We don't often get the opportunities that people that don't work in the church get, where they have coworkers they can share the gospel with and all that kind of stuff. So for people that actually work in the church, we have to be more intentional about making relationships with people outside the church, so that we can, you know, have a witness and we can share the gospel. And so then you start doing that where you're like, okay, well, my company is only Christians. You know, I mean, like, yeah, you're right. It just means you have to be more intentional about
just being clear. These are our values.
Yeah, just to make sure the intentionality doesn't lead to, or your siloing doesn't lead to a lack of intentionality.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I used to be a proponent of put your kids in public schools. We don't need to take people out. We need Christians in there, you know, but it's like, it's getting so hard, you know, to where I don't know if I would hold those same views anymore. Again, I think my own
How dare you change your mind?
I know.
it's not allowed.
I know. And it's not in a direction that I'm really excited about, to be honest, you know, but I feel like I'm getting, in my older years and seeing where we're going, I'm getting much more cautious because I didn't see the long-term impact. And so it's just, it's one of those things that's really sad. And I'm an optimistic person, and I am in the long run. Obviously, we know the end of the story, you know, and Jesus, you know, comes back and he reclaims what he first created. But in the meantime, we've got to be careful as Christians, especially as you guys, especially, you know, starting families, having families, and being responsible for kids. If God blesses you with kids, all those things, big responsibilities. So, wow, we went there from Candace Candace Oates. I kept on wanting to say that, Candace Cameron. So, any closing thoughts, comments?
No, I think we
Team Candace.
Yeah, pray for those who are out there who are Christians, even if they are. You know, when I first heard what was happening with Kanye, I was just like, oh boy, potentially here comes the next flash in the pan. And I would just need to pray for him. Young Christian, still trying to flesh it out, and he has to do it in the public eye. And that's going to happen, you know, from time to time, and pray that he figures it all out.
I think just to finalize too is just stop putting these people on pedestals.
Yeah. Yeah, they're human beings.
Yeah.
Pray for them.